So you may start.
Okay. Can you full screen it?
Yes, sir. Done.
I'm again facing some network problem. Is my voice audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Hello.
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Is my voice audible? Yeah, because I'm facing some problem, I guess. Okay. So if there is some problem, you just get notified. Okay, in the middle of session. So today I welcome you all for the fourth day of lecture based on photometry. So the in today's session we'll see what basically photometry is all about and all what you expect to do when I say that. Like for example, there are various stars in the night sky. So the primitive question, the primitive task that you would like to do is to go and capture its image and then have some sort of image analysis. Okay, just in order to remove some sort of sky contribution or sky contribution contributions or something else. Okay, because like at most of the times the light coming from the stellar sources will be getting extremely affected due to the atmosphere of Earth. So you need to implement the techniques of photometry in order to get proper images of the stellar sources that you see in the night sky. Next slide. Arnab, next slide.
Sir, I have switched the slide.
It's still not visible at my end. Is it switched? Okay, now it's switched. Okay. So the basic discussion that we are going to do today, the start of the session is what basically is photometry. Okay, so the photometry basically revolves around the essence of finding flux and the magnitude of a particular stellar source. Okay, so flux is basically the power that we receive from the stellar sources. Obviously, the stars are warehouses of energy. Inside the star continuously the nuclear reactions take place. Okay, and as a due result of the nuclear reactions taking place in the stars is basically a release of energy. That's why we see the particular star bright in the night sky. Obviously, so what basically we sense out of a particular star, that is basically its energy. Okay, and energy is distributed in form of flux. So whatever you receive on your receiving devices from the stellar sources is basically its flux. Okay, so photometry revolves around concept of finding flux of stellar objects, as well as once you've collected your flux, the second task is to determine the magnitude of the stellar sources. Obviously, you would have seen various catalogs and the other things, right? So basically the second task is to calibrate the magnitude of the stellar sources. So photometry is basically determining the flux and magnitude of the stellar sources. Now secondly, we see what are the types of objects that we see in the night sky. Okay, so basically there can be two sources or two kinds of objects that you see in the night sky. Basically we're talking about the stellar sources itself. They can be point sources like the stars in the night sky appear to be like points. Am I right or wrong? You may unmute yourselves and keep this session interactive. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay. So mostly when you will see the stars in the night sky, they basically are point sources, nothing but they are point sources. But when I say you're looking at a galaxy in the night sky, so it's not a point source, it's an extended source. Okay. So basically point sources just tend to appear like points in the night sky, whereas the extended sources are nothing but collection of various points. Okay. Like galaxy is not, it cannot be located at a single point. It's an extended object. Okay. So basically we can classify the objects that we see in the night sky into two categories, like point sources and extended sources. Okay. The next thing is there are various types of photometry depending upon the object classification. Now in this particular slide, we classified object as point sources and extended sources. Depending upon the same, for the point sources, you can use stellar photometry, Okay, so for point sources, you will go for stellar photometry, and for the X sources, you will go for the surface photometry. Okay, for the extended sources, you will go for the surface photometry. Next.
Sir, I guess you're not audible.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you are not audible.
Hello,
Yeah.
just wait a second. Just give me a minute. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Let me join from one more device because I guess there is some network problem, network connectivity problem. Just I apologize for the error, this particular problem from my end. Just give me a minute.
Okay, fine. Okay, so now let us see some potential application of photometry. Okay, like as in how the photometry can be, used. So first of all, it is a very important tool for modeling stars. Okay, so it can prove to be one of the important tools for modeling stars. Now you'll ask how we can model stars using photometry. So what basically happens, photometry is basically collection of power that is in the form of flux from various stars. So when you collect power from various stars, that particular power is distributed among various wavelengths. Okay, that is distributed among various wavelengths. So what basically happens is that once you collect flux, you get flux distribution for various wavelengths, and using the flux variation for various wavelengths, you can model the energy spectrum, because flux is like quite proportional to the energy that you receive. Just by giving some basic treatment, you can convert flux into energy. So once you get flux as a function of wavelength, you can soon convert it into energy as a function of wavelength. And once you get energy distribution of a star, it becomes very easy for you to model that particular star. So using photometry, you can easily model the stars. Next thing is about the temperature determination. So temperature determination can be carried from photometry, because photometry give you the essence of color, and color is quite dependent upon your wavelength. So what basically happens that temperature can be determined from the color of stars. So temperature determination becomes quite easy if you go for the photometry. So it can be beneficial for you to model the temperature. Okay. So the third application is obtaining the light curve. Okay, so light curves are quite essential curves in order to determine the time period, as well as the other prominent features of the stellar systems, like binary stars and the other stuff. Because on the basis of light curve, the presence of the binary stellar systems, so even you can obtain the very crucial binary star systems with the help of photometry. Okay. And the last, like there are n number of applications of photometry, but out of which the four prominent work ones are being listed on the screen. The fourth potential use of photometry is in determining distance and the size of stars. So once you get the color and the temperature estimate of the star, you can easily locate the star on the Hertzsprung-Russell's diagram, which is HR diagram. Okay, HR diagram is basically magnitude versus temperature kind of stuff. So once you get the magnitude, And once you are able to get a proper estimate of temperature of the star, you can kind of determine the size distance to that particular star from the HR diagram. So photometry gives you some basic tools in order to locate as in where the particular star is in the HR diagram. And once having the position of that particular star found in the HR diagram, you can easily go for determining the distance as well as the size of that star. Okay, next slide. Arnav, can you change the slide? Okay, so which is the slide? I only told you to go. Okay, basic outline. Okay, basic outline to think of photometry. So how you can basically visualize this entire process of photometry? Okay, so the first step is to identify the object. Okay, of whose the photometry is being done. Okay, so there are various rules for object identification that we will discuss in a very shorter while. Okay, and choice of analytical method. Whether you just are studying a single star or whether you are studying a picture which is clustered up with various stars, is going to decide whether which of the method will you use for applying the photometry. So if you have stars which are quite separated, from longer distances from each other, like which are quite apart from each other, so you can easily use the stellar photometry or what we call as aperture photometry. But when you can see like there are various stars in a very they're separated at a very smaller distances, or when I can say the stars are clouded, they're very much crowded in a particular image, then you go for PSF, that is point source fitting method. Okay, so depending upon the like how your image is, you choose for one or the other method. So first is you must you must identify the object of prime choice, and depending upon the objects in its surrounding, you will decide whether you will go for aperture photometry when the objects are quite apart from each other, or you will go for PSF method when the objects are quite crowded to each other. The second step is to measure flux. That is the second and the primitive step of sensing the amount of power that you receive. And once you have an estimate of power, then you can go for the magnitude calibration of that particular star. Next slide. Okay. So now the next thing is, how do we observe a source in different wavelengths? Now at most of the times, certain sources emit in this thing. Okay, that certain sources emit in radio frequencies. Certain sources are quite prominent in IR range. Certain sources are quite prominent in visual ranges. So depending upon in which particular wavelength zone do you want to observe your object, you need to specify your observation in that particular scale of wavelength. Okay. So like for example, as you can see on the screen, the observation is being done between 560 nanometers to 660, somewhere around 650 nanometers. Okay, so this is the range of observation. Yeah, basically the spectrum was, the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, but out of the entire electromagnetic spectrum, we are only choosing the wavelengths in between 560 nanometer to 650 nanometers. Okay, because depending upon your choice of study, you basically want to study that particular object in a given wavelength range. So what you will do, you are getting a continuous spectrum which has n number of wavelengths ranging from some values. Okay, but out of that you just need to study a specific part of wavelength. So for that particular things, you use filters. Filters are used just in order to pass a particular range of wavelengths. Okay, so this is a wavelength filter. So what is the task of this filter? It will transmit only the wavelengths. See, the transmission ratio is high. Transmission ratio is high means what? As you can see, the transmission ratio is high for this thing. It's high for particular part. I am annotating on the screen. So this particular part, the transmission is high. Okay, in this particular part, and for the rest of the wavelengths which you don't want, the transmission becomes zero. So it only passes the wavelength of the range 560 to 650 approximately, and it will remove out the wavelengths. It won't transmit the wavelengths of the wavelengths which are apart from the wavelengths that you're trying to look. That's why we use filters in order to observe a range of particular frequencies in the spectrum that you receive. Just in order to study in a particular, you would be tempted sometimes to study in IR zone, and you would be tempted sometimes to study in UV zones. So depending upon the choice, you go for the filters. Now you can see there was one term which is called as this lambda c, right? This lambda c. So the lambda c is basically the critical wavelength, is center wavelength. Okay, like from 560 to 650 approximately, it somewhere centers around 610. Range, this delta lambda is the range of frequencies which you can pass. Okay, it's the range of frequencies which can pass through a particular filter. So that is delta lambda. And the range of frequencies, the range of wavelengths, sorry, not frequencies, the range of wavelengths which can pass through this filter is called as the bandwidth of this filter. Okay, so the bandwidth so the bandwidth wavelengths are the wavelengths which can pass from this filter, and the rest of the wavelengths will be subdued, so that you particularly observe in the range which you basically want to observe in. Next slide, Arnav. Okay, so we need to follow the basic. Okay, so sorry for the interruption in the voice. So we need to follow the basic outline as you are able to see on the screen. So what is the basic outline that we need to follow? Okay, so first of all, we have discussed this thing. We need to identify the object, and then we need to choose a particular analytical method. Okay, after that we go for the flux measurement. So flux, as you could see, the filter was based on the wavelengths. It was rejecting certain wavelengths and it was accepting certain wavelengths. Okay, so the flux as a function of wavelength, as you can see on the rightmost part of the screen. So first you calculate the flux that you receive as a function of wavelength. And how you calculate it? The formula of function flux as a function of wavelength is the total amount of energy that you receive, okay, in that particular wavelength band, divided by the area of the receiver, okay, the area on which the radiation is falling, divided by the time interval in which you are taking that particular observation, divided by the range of wavelengths that you have permitted. That is going to be decided by your filter. So putting the values, you can easily find the flux as a function of wavelength. Okay, and this small f, you can even go for finding the energy of that particular source. So how you find the energy of a particular source? That small f is basically integration from 0 to infinity of f of lambda. F of lambda is a flux function that you have calculated from the previous step. It can be multiplied by t as a function of lambda, which is atmospheric transmission. Now atmosphere tends to show different kinds of responses to various frequencies. So t of lambda is atmospheric transmission as a function of wavelength. R of lambda is efficiency of both your telescope as well as detector. Obviously, the light that you receive from any kind of sources will first pass through your telescope, and at the end of telescope, you will place some sort of detector, like CCD detector is the one that we'll discuss today. Okay, so the CCD plus telescope. Now, each and every device is not 100% efficient. So there you need to account for the collective efficiency of that device. And the collective efficiency of that particular device is the telescope's efficiency plus the detector's efficiency, and that term is accounted by R lambda. And you need to again multiply this thing by S of lambda, that is transmission function of the filter, like as in how your responses, how it responds to various wavelengths, okay, into d lambda. That is how you get the energy. And after getting this thing, the last step is we need to calibrate for the magnitude. And how you calibrate your magnitude? The magnitude can be found out using this very simple relation. The visual scale magnitude is minus 2.5 times logarithm of, you need to take logarithm of f of lambda that you calculate from the first step plus a CV. CV is a correction term just in order to have magnitudes properly set or properly calibrated, because at most of the times you will see the Vega star, okay, the Vega star in the Lyra constellation is always considered to have zero magnitude. in all wavelength range. Like if you observe Vega star of Lyra constellation in any kind of filter using IR filter, UV filter, like your like let it be your visual filters, in all the filters, mostly the Vega star has magnitude of 0. Okay, so this correction term is just implemented in order to properly take a reference point of 0 and it can be properly corrected. This is just a correction factor in order to bring the numbers in some proper, like proper numbers. Like this magnitudes would be something which is like proper in a proper length. Next slide. Okay, so how the image sensing goes? Okay, so basically the light from your telescope now falls on the detector, which is going to image that particular object. So that is based on a quantum effect. Now you can see this, what basically happens is that you can see this arrow on the left hand side's image, this particular, that spiraling arrow, which is, falling on this CCD detector is basically your ensemble of photons. Okay, so these are nothing but photons. What happens when the photon strikes? The photon is basically the one which is carried to your detector by the flux itself, right? So basically the photons are being received by that particular stellar source in the night sky. So that photons basically strikes your detector and the energy of photon is transferred to the electrons in this particular detector. And what happens is that the energy from the photon is absorbed by your electron and it becomes now photoelectron. Now it gets released out from the detection surface. And these electrons, which are now released, photons which have been received from these stellar sources, now contribute to electronic in the CCD array. Now you can see in the middle figure, this basically are pixels. So the amount of photons, the amount of electrons will be ejected, and the number of photons is basically dependent upon the points in the image. Okay, the energy of the points in the image. So depending upon the same, each and every pixel will have some different amount of photoelectrons being generated. And how you basically image this, you basically read out every single row and column in an electronic detector, which basically senses an electric signal proportional to the amount of electrons being released in that particular pixel due to the photons being incidented. And henceforth, you can see an image which is there on the extreme right illustration. This is how the image forms. So you can see more brightness is proportional to more amount of photoelectrons being generated. And the amount of photoelectrons is directly proportional to the intensity that you sense at that particular point. And intensity basically is going to create the amount of photons that are being struck in that. So this is how image is being formed in the CCD array. Now you can go to the next screen, Arnav.
Actually, I'm trying, but it's not moving to the next screen. Just a minute.
Okay. You can escape. Okay. Okay, fine. Array, you went quite ahead.
I guess it's visible now. The next slide.
Yeah. Steps involved in photometry. Yeah. So now what are the steps involved in photometry? Okay, when I say now we'll do aperture photometry, a kind of picture just containing stars which are quite apart from each other. So there's contamination of light from stars observing. Okay. So these are the steps involved for the aperture photometry. The first step is you need to detect the object. Okay. The object of your choice must be detected. Second is you need to do centroiding of your figure. You need to essentially find where the center of your image lies, or center of your that particular object that you're studying lies. The third step is measuring the amount of flux that you get from that source originally. Fourth step is to measure the background flux and the other contribution, the other noise contributions that may be due to the atmospheric effects as well as the other stars present in its vicinity. Then you need to measure, and at the last you need to compute the noise, because obviously there can be some atmospheric induced noise, there can be certain noises induced due to the stars in the vicinity. So once having the fourth step done, you can go for compensating, you can go for eliminating the noise by computing noise first and then eliminating it. Okay. So these are the steps which are involved in the aperture photometry based on the point sources, wherein the point sources are quite apart from each other, and there is no like much contribution from the sky and the atmosphere into the image. Next slide.
Sir, I guess the next slide is visible.
Yes, now it's visible, Arnav. So basically, first we will discuss what is object detection. Okay, what basically object detection is. So in the object detection part, what basically done is that there are various objects in this on the screen. Can you see the the left topmost image? As you can see, there are various star, and there are also some contribution from the sky. Can you see the fuzzy white spread around the screen around that image? There are certain very bright stars as well as certain fuzzy stars also. Can you see on the left topmost image? I hope you are able
Yes,
to
sir.
see that. Yes. So what basically happens is that there is a lot of fuzzy sky contribution as well as there are certain bright sources. So how you basically detect your object? Detection of object is basically selecting the object of your choice. So selection of object basically depends upon a thing which is called as sky background. Obviously, we need to separate our object of choice from the sky contributions so that we can study it very properly. So there is a thing which is called as a sky background. So it's again given in some pixels only. Why? Because the entire image is done in pixel scale only. So what happens is that we basically set a limit, okay, a limit of pixels. If the limit of pixels is greater than that value, is greater than the threshold value that you have decided, then all the objects having pixels more than those threshold will be detected on your screen. Okay, so basically we take the least bound on that pixels to be 4 times the sky background. Okay, so if there is a number, like if there is a number sigma, which is nothing but a sky contribution, so you will take a threshold limit to be more than 4 times sigma. Okay, so what will happen if you take more than 4 sigma? Then all these fuzzy white things will disappear. Why? Because it is only having that sigma amount of contribution in pixels. But we are only studying those images which are having pixel contribution of more than 4 sigma, right? So this is a kind of filter which is going to abstract only those points, only those objects in the image which have pixels more than this threshold value. So if you apply that sky background correction, so this dark objects, you can see those bright points, they have pixels more than 4 times sigma. So in the next image, you can see the entire background now has become black. The sky contribution has quite been it's quite like kind of eliminated. It's quite eliminated, and now you can only see those points in the image which have the object detection limit more than 4 times the sky background. So this is how we eliminate in quite we eliminate the sky background, and we basically can now focus on the bright objects. And this basically, then you would ask me, sir, now you are just telling me a technique to detect the bright object. What if I am studying some fainter objects? So in those cases, you can keep your limit less than 4 sigma, a bit less than 4 sigma, but make sure that it's never sigma or less than sigma. Why? Because then sky contribution will be much more. So you can take a number a bit lesser than 4 sigma, okay, in order to detect your faint objects. But it's always suggested to keep it more than 4 sigma. So this is how we go for the object detection. The next point is centroiding. Now in the centroiding, as you can see the X bar and Y bar, now you can see this particular image is a planar image. So in order to locate a point on plane, you need to have 2 points, right? The X coordinate as well as the Y coordinate. So how you would find the center of a object of your choice? You can find it using the centroiding. Now you can see, even if I say it's a star, okay, so in the star, most of its intensity is at its center, and as you go to see at the edges of the star, like at the edge of the star, the intensity tends to fall, and in the background of the star, the intensity is very less. Okay, it's just the contribution of the background, nothing else than that. Okay, so basically, how to find centroid? Centroid is just like finding your mean. How you find mean? So centroid of the image in X and Y can be found as its summation from I equal to 1 to n. It means that all the n pixels which are falling under your that particular object. It's a summation from I equal to 1 to n intensity of ith component of or the ith pixel multiplied by the x coordinate of that pixel divided by summation of the intensity of all the pixels. Similarly, you can find the y centroid of your image. How you can find it? It's summation again from I equal to 1 to the n pixels of that entire star. Multiply that summation is running over intensity of ith component, multiplying it by y component of the ith component, ith component of the pixel, y coordinate of the ith component of the pixel, divided it by the summation of intensity of all such pixels. And henceforth, you can find the x coordinate and y coordinate of the center of your object. And the last thing is how you can find the contribution, like flux, the flux that you measure. Now, the basic point is to calculate the flux from the pixel. So how you go for finding the flux? The flux is basically contribution of I plus S. Now, the intensity of the source is detected, as well as this S is the sky contribution. Because now whatever you're looking at the screen is quite eliminated for the sky, but still there are certain things which have not been eliminated. So the entire flux that you detect on your detector is basically contribution of the intensity as well as the I is basically contribution of intensity due to the sky. Due to the sky summation of I, capital I running over ij means what? You are calculating the intensity of n pixel is basically the sky count. This n, so many pixels in the sky are contributing to your noise in the image, and multiplied by sky count, that is contribution per pixel. That is what magnitude of noise, that is the total number of pixel multiplied by the amount of noise that it is contributing. So this entire thing, that is contribution of the source as well as the noise. We need to eliminate the second term in order to have the proper readings. The next slide. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we'll have some discussions. You were saying something, Arnav?
Sir, your voice in between gets
Okay.
very damp.
So now we'll have. Hello.
Sir, your
Is it
voice,
audible now?
your voice in between gets very damped. So just shift to some other place.
Okay. Is it okay? Is it okay now?
Yeah, you continue.
Okay. So now we'll have some discussion on errors. Okay. Now, as in how the errors are caused. Okay. So first is the Poisson error. Okay. So what is basically Poisson's error? It's basically error caused due to the photon noise. Okay. Due to the photons being incidented on the detector. So how the photon noise is caused? Now there are various like the photons falling in a particular pixel are not same for each and every pixel. Okay. So pixel. So due to the photons which are incidenting on various pixels of CCD, it causes the photon noise. And the photon noise is basically called or it's basically coined as Poisson error. And this particular error follows a Gaussian profile. Okay, it basically follows a Gaussian profile. And how to calculate this error? This error is denoted by sigma ADU, and it can be calculated by under root of ADU. ADU is basically a count term, photon count term, and you need to divide it. You need to count that per gain. Okay, and if you take under root of this counts per gain, you'll get the Poisson. This error caused you. The next, crowded field contamination. Now, crowded field contamination is quite self-explanatory from the words itself. Due to the crowd of various stars nearby to each other, due to that particular crowding, a very high amount of error is induced in your image. Okay, and that kind of due to nearby spacing of contamination, right? Okay. Now, how do we decide the proper aperture size? Aperture basically the collection size. Okay, the collection aperture for properly getting your flux. So now the one thing is the more big aperture will you keep your aperture to be more of a more diameter than the object that you're observing, you will add in more contribution from the sky. Okay, so if your aperture is very big than the source you're observing, you will collect some extra flux from the sky contribution just in order to eliminate extra contribution from the sky. It's quite it's quite anticipated that we must choose a proper aperture size so that we collect the products coming from that particular source. So how do we decide the proper aperture or the collection size for imaging a particular object? So for that, you need to make a curve which is called as the curve of growth, as you can see on the screen, which gives you the amount of flux that you receive plotted against the aperture diameter in the arc seconds. Okay, like in this arc seconds, this aperture diameter, like of what diameter aperture. So what you will do is you will first try to find the curve of growth of that particular object. Okay, so in that particular curve of growth, as you can see on the line which is made, most of the flux below that 50, below this particular line on the screen, because I can't show you, just try to visible in this particular zone. In this particular zone, okay, you can see most of the flux in this particular zone is basically is contributed by the star. Okay, is mostly contributed by this. At that point, you can see there is barely increase in flux. There is barely increase in the flux in this region. When I say in this region, now in this region, if I say now in this particular region, what happens is that there is barely increase in the flux. So most of the main contribution was in the part which I have highlighted previously. Okay, so most of the main contribution of the star, most of the stars inside, what I can say is that particular object that you're looking, most of the flux contribution within that object lies in the shaded area. Okay, so what you basically do is you select that particular size. In that particular case is 60, right? So you will select 60 arc seconds to be your size, because if you increase size more than this, then you will have more contribution from the sky, and it will become much more tiring for you to eliminate it and choose. Similarly, in the second figure, the choice is made using the curve of growth. So it's I have basically joined from mobile. I'm speaking from mobile, and I have joined from laptop. Arnav.
Sir, then you may leave from laptop.
Both sources are different. Both sources are different.
No, but the bandwidth would increase from mobile now if you leave from laptop.
Is my voice breaking?
Actually, it's not
Is my
breaking,
voice
but
breaking
it's
still?
fluctuating in between.
Okay, is it faced by everyone or is it faced at your end? Can anyone other let me know that
Yes,
whether
it
my
is
voice
breaking a bit.
a bit? Okay. I am facing some connectivity problems today, so if severe when you're not able to understand whatever I'm speaking, just let me know. Is it that severe? Is the problem that severe?
Actually, sir,
At certain time, it's very severe.
Okay. Because I can't help. I'm joined with two devices, and my particular area is facing the same problem now. So you need to bear with that. Okay. So if it becomes severe, you just get me notified in the chat box, because I'm having a constant eye over it. Okay. So I need to change my place now. This remains same in our area. That's what I'm saying. It's not even working in the balconies. That's what I'm saying. I'm sitting in the balcony. So I think it's not working anywhere in our area now today. I have joined from two different networks. Like the one with which I have joined with laptop is different, and the mobile handset is different. Okay, now you You know, the problem is everywhere. I'm saying. Okay. So, okay, fine. So let's not waste time here. So can you actually Arnav, next slide.
Actually, your voice was not audible. So yeah, next slide. Is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible. Now, am I audible?
Yeah, it's audible. You're audible.
Okay. Okay. Fine. So now let us study steps involved in aperture photometry. What are the steps involved? So first, in order to find the contribution of the main image, we need to measure the aperture count. Okay, that is the main, that is the pixel count of the image, okay, the object that look or study. The second step is defining sky annulus for removing the sky contribution. So now you need to calculate the pixels which the sky contribution or the sky noise is more. Okay, so that is those amount of pixels you calculate from the second step. And the third is counts. Counts is basically the proper corrected counts. So for that, what you need to do is you need to first take the pixel counts, that is the annulus count. Okay. That is aperture count. The term is to be corrected. Count is aperture count minus sky annulus. So first you need to take the count, the counts of your object, and you subtract contribution from it. The amount of pixels which are being additionally added to the sky noise. And once you find the count, that is aperture count minus the sky annulus count, then you can calculate magnitude easily using the formula, which is minus 2.5 times log of the pixel count of the corrected, which is corrected from the sky contribution, divided by the exposure time. Is my am I audible now? I was changing my place. Is my voice audible now,
Uh,
Arnav?
yes, sir, you're audible now, but you may change your place if it's still breaking.
I have changed. That's why I have. That's why I left. I have changed my place. Is the
Okay, sir.
problem
Now it's
still
clearly audible. Now
persisting?
it's clearly audible. We will let you know if it breaks.
Yeah, because I have changed my place now. Sorry for the. Sorry for this thing. Nothing is there in my hand today. I don't know out of all of a sudden this problem has arisen. Okay. So how I was discussing about magnitude. Magnitude can be easily calculated using the formula. Once you have properly calculated the counts with the sky contribution removed, you can calculate the proper magnitude from this formula. Next slide, Arnav. Okay. So how you go for finding the first, how you find the annulus, the aperture annulus, and then how you go for calculating the sky annulus. So for calculating the aperture, you take this inner circle. Inner circle basically contains that object properly. Okay. So that is how you calculate the counts. The number of pixels that will lie in this small circle is basically your object. Okay, the object that you're looking, and just like 2 to 3 times you just take it to be like the first. Now this radius, this inner annulus and the outer annulus will contain those pixels which will contribute to the sky noise. Okay, so for that you define inner annulus and the outer annulus in this particular fashion. Okay, now basically the area of this inner circle will give you the total number of pixels falling in that object, which is nothing but your aperture count, and the area of this annulus, that is the area of outer circle minus the area of inner circle, will be the area of that ring formed due to sky. So the amount of, so this particular ring that is formed, the area of the ring will give you the sky contribution. Okay, you need to minus the area of that inner circle minus the area of this ring. That is what you do to calculate the counts free from the sky contribution. That is how you calculate, and you need to divide it by the exposure time. And like for ideally, if I say that like when I say the radius is 5, like let me take a hypothetical case. The inner radius is 5, then you will take the inner annulus to be somewhere around 12 counts and outer annulus to be somewhere around 15 counts. They're just like, 2 to 3 times more than the inner radius. You can take this annulus in that fashion. The radius of the inner annulus will be somewhere around 2 times your aperture radius, and outer annulus will be 3 times your aperture radius. You can make a choice in this way. Choice can be done any way you want, but ideally you can take it this way. Don't take it very big, otherwise the sky of you will take some unwanted regions, okay, which is not even contributing in your image noise. Next slide. Okay, so next is optimal aperture size selection. How you can optimally select your aperture size. Now we have seen that aperture size can be selected from that thing. Like initially we had a discussion based on curve of growth. There is one more thing in which you can one more thing which you can use to calculate the aperture size is basically the light profile, like how much radiation you collect per wavelength. Okay, so like how much you think how much collection that in the see the below figure, it gives you the contribution of intensity versus like how the profile as the pixel, as you move out of your star, see mostly the contribution is at the center, and as soon as you move away, as soon as the pixels increase from the center of your star, the light starts falling away because now you are moving outside the star. So the rest of the portion will be just your sky contribution, nothing else. And most of the intensity will be somewhere around, like this highest intensity correspond to the pixels which are quite close to the center of your star. Okay, this is how you decide. So the another size for optimally selecting the aperture is FWHM, that is full width at half maximum. Now how you select the full width at half maximum? What you do is you first select the pixel, you select the center pixel at which the maximum light is obtained, that is nothing but your centroid point. Okay, now what you will look, you will first calculate the intensity at your maximum, and then you will go for the intensity where the intensity falls to half. Okay, where the intensity falls to half of your maximum intensity, and then you will calculate at which pixel this is happening, at which pixels this phenomena where the light reduces to half of the intensity takes place. And this particular red shaded band will give you the aperture size or the aperture diameter. Okay, so this aperture size can be selected for properly having your aperture done. So FWHM can be a trick to find this this red shaded zone will give you the amount, the pixel size of the aperture that you need to select for having proper image contribution as well as less amount of sky contribution getting collected. Okay, so for the second figure, you can see the downmost figure, the FWHM is 6.5 pixels approximately. You can easily calculate it, but this is just half part of the curve. Okay, this is not a proper Gaussian profile. Why? Because most of the core part is this topmost part, this pinching away part. So this core part, that is the center bulge point, this part is basically composed of the seeing, that is basically the star contribution, as well as a bit of exponential drop as you move away from the star, diffraction. And this as this wing part is this down, this ending parts which merges into the background is basically the one which follows the inverse square law at the wings. That's why this profile, as you are looking at the skin, this is a perfect Gaussian, but in reality you would get something which is in the represented in the downmost figure. It is contribution of the seeing as well as the exponential drop due to diffraction as well as the inverse square law, which is mostly followed at the wing, the part where the object basically ends and you get in with the sky. So that is not properly Gaussian, but yeah, you can use the concept of FWHM to properly and optimally select for your aperture size. Next slide. Okay, so this was the techniques that we discussed in the last slide was for the star, which is like a single star which is not having some other star in its vicinity. But what if you have many stars contributing? This is a very much crowded structure. So I would discuss PSF fitting. It's very difficult to get along with the PSF fitting. even its programming is very difficult, but I'll just give a very brief idea as into how we do. In this entire clustered image, you need to first choose an object which is very bright, and second, in this entire crowd, you need to first select an object which is extremely bright and an object which is not having many stars in its vicinity. So you can, optimally choose the one which is in the red box. In this entire figure, you can choose this red box. Why? Because this spot has, very high intensity, and even it does not have many stars in its vicinity. Like it has some stars, but they are quite separated. Okay, you need to take first bright, and it must not have very many stars in its vicinity. Okay, just vicinity. So in its neighborhood, it's not having many stars and it's quite bright. So such star you will select in that particular image. And the second step is the region that you want to image. The region of your choice which you want to image is in this green zone. So how you will do PSF fitting is, first you will calculate. First you will do the aperture photometry, the photometry that we have discussed till now, on the one which is highlighted in the red box. So first you will do aperture photometry for this single star which is highlighted in the red box, and what you will do is you will subtract its result with the one. We will subtract the aperture photometry result of this object in the red box with the entire image. So what will happen when you minus the magnitude of the higher stars, the magnitude of the other star will quite cease, and you will get image on the right half. Okay, so can you see the subtracted image, the subtracted PSF in the green zone does not have any kind of protrudings. It is not having any kind of protrudings. It's quite a complete plain figure, right? It's quite plain figure, right? Can you see the green box on the right? It's a complete plain figure. Okay,
Yes,
so what basically how Yes. So how basically you will say that your PSA fitting is done properly? If you get the image, if you get the zone of your choice to be completely removed with any kind of image, then you can say your PSA fitting is done well. And as you know, this thing is done. So what happens is that in this particular box, as you can see in this green box, the nothing is there. So what happens is that if you're subtracting one from the other thing, if it basically vanishes, then you can say that somewhere they could have been, like properly matched. They are properly scaled with their magnitudes, and that is how you can determine the magnitude of the cluster which is removed in the second image, just by subtractive scaling. This is what is called as PSF fitting. It's very difficult to grasp that PSF fitting at this stage, but yeah, you can just have first you need to carry out aperture photometry for the one which is highlighted, and that star that you're selecting must be very bright, and it should not have like many components in its neighborhood. You can carry out the aperture photometry, obtain its result, and subtract it from the entire image, and subtract it till you get nothing in the zone which you wanted to study, and then you can comparatively analyze the zone of your interest by scaling and comparing it with the one which was carried on which the aperture photometry was carried. Next slide. Okay, now how to calculate signal to noise ratio? The last step is to calculate in the entire discussion was the noise calculation. So first of all, so when I say you want to calculate signal to noise ratio, first you need to calculate signal. Signal is what? Contribution of the star itself. Okay, the pixels of the star itself. So how you will calculate the signal? That is we define it by n star, that is counts above the sky, or the counts contributed by your image times the gain. Gain is basically the contribution of intensity of that particular pixel, of every pixel. So signal is determined by counts above the sky contributed by that image multiplied by gain. The second step is, now let us head towards finding the photon noise, because photon noise is induced in the CCD at the time of generation. So how you calculate your photon noise? Photon noise is n star, the pixels that obviously, now see, you are imaging a particular star. So the light coming from that star is going to carry photons, and that photons, when will interact with your CCD, they will release the free electrons. So in that sense, the entire object that you are looking, or all those pixels in which the image is forming, will contribute to your photon noise, because they are the only zones where the photon is contributing to the release of photoelectrons, and that those photons, due to varying levels of photons, the noise is being induced. So how to calculate the photon noise? Photon noise is n star, the total number of that is the signal itself, right? Because the signal itself carries the photons, so it's under root of signal plus sky contribution, because now sky will also generate some photons and which will induce some noise. So the photon noise is n star plus sky. Now how to calculate the readout noise? The readout noise is under root of pixels. These p pixels are nothing but the sky pixels. Okay, this is nothing but the image pixels. Okay, the image pixels, you need to take under root of this pixels and multiply it by readout. Readout you will get on your handout. We'll take one question wherein you will study how to calculate this. And total, now how you can find in total noise? Total noise is under root of photon noise whole square plus readout noise whole square. Okay, this is that thing. And once you calculate the total noise, you wanted ratio of signal to noise. So signal is calculated in step number 1, and step number 4 calculates the total noise. So the signal to noise ratio is n star, that is the signal, divided by total noise, which was capital N. That is how you calculate the signal to noise ratio. Next slide. Okay, so now let us go for calculating the uncertainty in signal to noise ratio. That is, uncertainty means what? What is the amount of error that you are doing while calculating the signal to noise ratio? Like for example, have you seen some number that answer is 2 with plus minus of 0.01 as a precision? Have you read certain answers of this form? Like the answer is 2 with plus minus of 0.01. Have you seen certain questions in which you give answers in this way? Like the answer of that question is 2 with plus minus of 0.01 error. So that plus minus error which you specify with your answer is nothing but the uncertainty that you expect while you're solving this S by N ratio. So how to calculate that? The uncertainty or the error in calculation of the S by N can be given as minus 2.5 times log of signal plus noise divided by signal. Now the signal plus this inside bracket can be simplified as, in the second step, the error that is generated is equal to minus 2.5 times log of 1 plus n by s. Right? If you just separate the fraction, you'll get this thing 1 plus n by s. Now there is one thing which is called as the Taylor's expansion for logarithm. I don't know whether you know this thing or not, but this log of 1 plus n by s can be written as this thing, plus minus 2.5. There is one division factor due to expansion of log of 1 plus this thing, as the division factor comes as 2.3, and you can write this log of this thing in Taylor's expansion as 1 by 2.3 times n plus s minus 1 by 2 factorial n by s whole square plus 1 by 3 factorial n by s whole cube. Then come minus 1 by 4 factorial n by s whole raised to 4, and so on. These terms will continue to infinity. Okay, this is how you can write log of 1 plus this quantity. Now just tell me one thing, in a particular system, do you get signal more or noise more? Is full form is signal to noise. Signal to noise. Listen carefully. So just tell me one thing, is signal more or noise more? What you will receive more when you're observing? Will you receive signal more or noise more? I guess you will, okay, you will receive noise more. How you will receive noise more? If you
Signal.
you will just look anything else. Signal more, you look signal more, right? And you get noise very less, but you still get, but noise is quite less. Just tell me one thing, when noise is less and signal is more, this n by s ratio will be a very small number. Do you agree or not? When noise is less and signal is more, that is what is practically observed. This n by s is going to be a very small term. Do you agree or not? Yes. So when this term is more, and if you take square of a very small quantity, or even if you take higher powers of a very small quantity, they contribute to very, very, very small numbers. So in this particular expansion, which is going to infinity, you can ignore n by s whole square, n by s whole cube, and the higher terms. So you are just left with n by s and multiplication by 2.5 into 2.3 times plus minus ratio. Why? Because n by s square and the other higher powers of the n by s can be ignored just because the n by s in itself is a very small quantity. And once you do that simplification, you'll be left with plus minus 1.087 times n by s, which is nothing but 1 times n by s, which is 1 by reciprocal of signal to noise ratio. So the error in calculating signal to noise ratio is reciprocal of signal to noise ratio. Okay, so if the signal to noise ratio is, let us say, 5, so what will be the error in signal to noise ratio? It will be 1 by 5, that is 0.2, right? 0.2. So the basic thing that I wanted to say you was the error in calculating signal to noise ratio is inverse of signal to noise ratio. Okay, that amount of error is done while calculating the signal to noise ratio. Next slide. Okay, so now we are at the end of our discussion. So how we calibrate our instrument? Now the magnitudes that we were calculated were the instrumental magnitude. Instrumental means what? You had one telescope as instrument and you had CCD as instrument. But if you want to calibrate with some standard magnitudes, then you can use this formula where M standard is the magnitude that you want to that is a new standard scale that you want to establish. That magnitude minus the M instrumental is equal to 0 point. 0 point is the is basically a point at which your this particular scale was defined, plus K is the extinction factor times secant of Z, 0 point, plus color term, that is the color terms multiplied by color. You don't require this formula as in now because it will become difficult. Even if you find the magnitude of instrumentation, it's still okay. Like the magnitudes that we have discussed, the calculation that we have discussed till now is calculation of magnitude instrumental. This equation can merely be ignored. Like it's just a kind of optional equation. Okay. So thank you for the session. Now we are done with our the part of the photometry, the understanding of photometry. Now we'll head for discussion of one question, one tutorial problem. Arnav, can I try sharing my screen now? Can I try sharing my screen now with laptop? Because in tutorial problem, I need to highlight some things. Can I do that?
Okay, you
Just tell me
do
one
that.
thing.
But
Can you enable me doing that?
yes, sir.
Yeah, just give me permission to share the screen.
Sir, you have permission to share the screen.
Okay. It said host disabled participant sharing the screen.
Wait,
Have you
let
stopped
me
your
correct.
screen share?
Yeah. Yeah, I have not allowed participants to share.
Because now I'm participant now, so you need to give that authority to me, and just one screen share at a time. You just change the setting to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Is my shared screen visible? Just tell me that thing.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. So now we'll take a tutorial problem. This problem is taken from International Olympiads in Astronomy and Astrophysics 2017. I have modified it a bit. Okay, I won't be solving step by step, but I'll give you an idea as into how to solve this problem, as into how to solve this tutorial problem. So the tutorial problem's heading is Gravitational Wave Optical Transient Observer, that is GOTO Observatory. It's based on that thing. Okay, so this is a question that we'll take today to solve. Fine. So in this question, what we'll do is GOTO aims to carry out search of optical counterparts of any gravitational wave within an hour of their detection by the LIGO and Virgo experiments. This is some kind of thing that they're sharing. For simplicity of analysis, we assume that telescope's field of view is the area in which it's basically observing the night sky. It's an angular measure. So for simplicity of analysis, we assume that telescope's field of view don't overlap with one another, because this GOTO observatory is collection of various scopes. So at most of the times, there would be overlapping in the looking area of the scopes. There can be overlapping in those areas. So just for that thing, what they have said is, for the sake of simplicity, assume that each and every telescope looks in a part of sky which is not being observed by the other telescope. Okay, so every particular telescope is looking at an area in a sky which is not being observed by the other one. Okay, that is what they're saying. We don't require this thing. This is a kind of thing that they have shared. So now the question starts. If the 0 point magnitude, that is the magnitude at which the count rate, now in the last slide, you might have seen this 0 point, right? So if the 0 point magnitude, what is that thing? That is the magnitude at which the count rate detected, that is the counts being detected by your detector, is just 1 count per second. If that is just 1 count per second. So we said 0 point is a magnitude at which we only sense 1 count per second of telescope is 18.5 magnitude. So the ZP, the value of ZP in the question, just by reading it, you can see that the value of ZP is 18.5 magnitude. Okay, which is and how this 18.5 ZP, that is 0 point, is calculated? It is basically calculated using this formula. This formula is there is some magnitude that you use to calculate this particular thing. That particular magnitude, the magnitude that you use, just let me change the color. The magnitude that you use in order to calculate the 0 point, is related by this formula. So the magnitude of interest is equal to minus 2.5 times log of count rate. You need to put count rate plus 0 point. So the 0 point in itself is 18.5. This thing is calculated as 18.5. Okay. Now, in order to calculate magnitude and count rate, we need to know, we need to get these two terms, right? So let us read the question ahead. Let us do the question ahead. Okay. So proceeding ahead in the question. Okay, just let me erase the annotations. Okay. So with this, so calculate the minimum time needed to reach to 21 magnitude. Okay. So now you need to calculate in the question, you need to calculate the minimum time which is required in order to reach to 21 magnitude at signal to noise ratio of 2. So you need to consider signal to noise ratio as 2 for a point source. Okay. We first assume that noise is dominated by both readout noise. Okay. So the two noises which are there in the system are readout noise, and the second noise is the dark thermal noise, that is the DN noise. Okay, that is the collector noise itself, that is the CCD readout noise. Readout noise is nothing but called as dark thermal noise. So you need to solve the question. Okay, and readout noise is given as 12 counts per pixel per second, and the thermal noise is given as 5 counts per pixel per minute. Okay, now the hint is minute. You need to convert minute into seconds, that is the standard quantity. Now you need to start solving the question. So in this question, you need to find the time taken, right? The entire question revolves around the concept of finding time. So for finding time, okay, you would require count rate and all those stuff. I guess count rate is again given to you. Where the count rate, I guess, if I just slide it out, okay, so count rate is not given, but can you find the count rate? Can you find the count rate? You can easily find it. How? The magnitude is given. You need to find 21 as magnitude, right? So you can put 21 here. 21 is the magnitude that you're looking for. And 0 point is what? 18.5. This is your 18.5. So just tell me one thing. You know the 0 point. You know the magnitude. Can you solve this equation to find the count rate? Can you solve this equation to find the count rate? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So you can easily calculate it. It will be 21. Take the 0 point over that side. So that will be 21 minus 18.5. Then you divide it by minus 1.25, and you'll take 10 to the power that particular number. So you can find the count rate. You can find the count rate easily. Okay. So just put this value and you can find the count rate. Okay. So you can now find the count rate. Okay. So this is how you can find the count rate. Now, once you have found the count rate, you can easily calculate the time taken. Okay, you can easily calculate the time taken. Do you know the SNR? Do you know the sound signal to the noise ratio? You know it. That is true. So sound signal to noise related from this particular. That is the one thing which was calculated from this equation. You can put it in the count rate. Now time taken is in seconds. That you can calculate. But for this you need to find the sigma RON, that is readout noise, and sigma DN, that is the dark noise. Now what are the formulas for both of these things? The sigma the sigma readout noise can be calculated by under root of n pixel into readout noise. In this n pixel is to be taken as 1. This is given here in the down part, that n pixel is 1. You can read it in the document. I'm not shifting it now down. But in this question, they have told that the pixel count, the n pixel is 1. Okay, you need to take this value as 1 for this system which we are discussing. Just tell me one thing. When you know this n pixel is 1 and the readout noise, do you know the readout noise? Yes, that's what? That's 12 count per pixel per second. Am I right? It's 12. So you just need to put here 12. 12 counts per pixel per second. You can put it 12. But just tell me one thing, in the dark noise itself, will you be able to put this number directly in the dark noise somewhere over here? Will you be easily able to put it over here? Times the time taken, okay? Times the time taken. So dark noise is count per pixel per minute, but mostly you need to put the things in second. So you just need to convert this 5 counts per pixel per minute into 5 counts per pixel per second. So for that you will divide 5 by 60. So you'll get counts per second. You'll get counts per second. So instead of putting 5, the only trick was, instead of putting DN as 5, you'll put it as 5 by 60. You'll put it as 5 by 60. Have you got this thing? Because this was count per minute. So getting count per second, that will be 5 counts per minute. It was per minute. So per second it will be 5 by 60. You will put it as DN, n pixel is again 1, and time taken is still to be found. So you can take this unknown variable as T, and here also you can put it as T. So now you have calculated the sigma RON. You can put it over here. That is what 1 into RON, it will be there. Sigma square will be what? N pixel time RON square, plus dark noise is what? N pixel. You can put this and you can easily get the time taken. It will form a quadratic equation. So now the thing is, I'll share this question PDF with you all after the session on WhatsApp group. You can put in the values which are shared in this particular document and try solving this thing on your own. Okay, try solving this thing on your own, and I will appreciate your answers coming on the WhatsApp group. You can share your answers on the WhatsApp group. So is this thing clear? Is this thing clear? I have shared the outline of the problem with you. Outline of the problem with you. In this n pixel for this observatory is 1. I have shared the outline, like how to solve this problem with you. Now, can you put in the values and solve it and share your answers on the group? I guess you can do that exercise. Okay, you can do that exercise. I'll read the chat now. Okay. Okay, so are there any doubts? Now you can ask your doubts. I'll stop my screen sharing. Now you can stop the recording, Rohan, Arnav. Arnav, you can stop the recording.
Yes, sir, I'm stopping it.